Okay, we're gonna do a Hario V60. I've got around 21 grams of coffee weighed out, and you gotta make sure that nothing is touching the scale. I think I might have bumped that. So side pressure, if something is pushing in from this side, it's going to add weight to your scale. So just be careful of that. All right, so let's get the hot water. Now, typically what I do is I transfer from my tea kettle to this, and then I make sure it's super hot, as hot as possible. And I've got a little bit of extra water here, and so first thing I do is weigh out my coffee. We're doing a Hario V60. I'm doing a 210 timing, 30-second bloom, and 3-minute is our end time. Doing 21 grams to 340 grams water, so that's a 16.2 brew ratio. I'm doing a 60. Doing a 16 on the Virtuoso grinder, and we're using Joe Bean's Mexican coffee. The water's at 200. I like to get it as hot as possible, so we're gonna bring that up. And one of the things I do is I pick up the filter at least 1 or 2 times and just let it sit. And I'll take this and I'll dump this down the sink, but when I dump it, I'll pour it back through. And the whole point of that is we want to make sure that the filter is draining quickly. And so that lets me eyeball it again, just to make sure that where I put the filter, it is no longer going to be draining slowly. Push the grind button a bit to make sure I get everything. We'll tear the scale, zero it out. And I want to add exactly 21 grams or 21.1. I don't want to go any over that, and so I'm just going to sort of slowly shake it out. The water is hot, so I sort of boil my Hario kettle. So now this is at the maximum temperature. It's right at 210, it looks like. Okay. One thing to keep in mind, evaporation will cause the weight of this to change, so make sure that you weigh it quickly, because the evaporation from the water that you've added to the filter is going to change the weight in about 10 to 30 seconds. It'll go down if you have a gram accurate scale. Don't have anything push against the edges. If I put my iPhone too close, you'll see that now we're seeing 40 grams. That's because the pressure is pushing and creating a downward force. So make sure nothing is touching the scale. The other thing that we're going to be doing is I'm going to use 2 hands. So fold up a dish towel. So I've just folded this up into a couple parts, and that's going to give us some protection from the heat. I'm going to tear my scale, and it's if I can switch modes again. Okay. I always mix up the buttons on this fancy scale. Okay, so we're ready to go. I'm going to start the timer. I've got my spoon. It's hot so that I can stir. We're gonna do a 30-second bloom, and then I'm gonna pour, and I'll walk through the process. Now, the first thing that you need to lock in is your grind size. And then once we've locked that in, then it's all about the pour. How we pour will affect how this drains. And then the other factor that's going to be more of a factor, depending on where you're getting your filters, is the filter itself. So I am using filters from my H2 box. This is a Hario V60 paper filter, no tab, from the Japanese factory. I have other filters that are way more inconsistent, and so I don't use them regularly because they result in worse coffee. So let's go through and start brewing. Hit start, and we're gonna do our bloom. So I'm gonna pour 42 grams or so. And we're gonna give that a good stir. We don't want any air bubbles because that means that coffee is not touching any of the hot water. So you're gonna stir that up. I like to try and keep a level at the end. I don't want like to throw coffee grinds up on the lip because I want them to retain the heat. Okay, so we'll let that sit. Sometimes I'll rinse this with a little bit of water. Otherwise I'll wait until the 30 seconds is up just to let it bloom. And now we add water. So now I've got to add a bunch of water. And this is where 2 hands is really useful. And we're going to go ahead and go around this in circular motions to add water. Now, as you can see, it's telling me that I need to be a little bit further ahead. So I'm going to continue to pour water. And one of the things, you notice how I tapped that? When you go to the left side here, you actually have to lift up the Hario. So it's a lifting motion. It's not just going in a circle, and that is because the Hario kettle that I have, the Bueno kettle, the gooseneck actually gets in the way. And if you've got the Bonavita kettle, you're gonna have to do the same type of thing. This gooseneck is great, but if you see, I'm gonna hit right here. So I have to lift up and then pour on the far side. All right, so I'm a little behind. Let's get in front. Okay, so now I'm in front of my pacer, but my pacer is gonna catch up, and so I'm gonna add more water again. And I really wanna stay ahead of this pacer. I've been having trouble with this draining too slow, but then I've also been in trouble where this sometimes will drain too fast. One thing that you want to be mindful of is you don't really want to be distracted. And if you're noticing that it feels like it's slow, like right now it feels like it's slow, I'm going to pick this up carefully without burning my tips of my fingers. I'm going to put it down and we're going to add that last remaining water. The next thing I'm going to do once I hit my mark is I'm going to stir. Now if you went over by too far with this, one thing you can do is you can pick up some of that water and you can pull it out to reduce the ratio and fix that error. But you do want to get more precise at that. So I've just given it a stir, trying to break any of the channels that might have formed as it's sort of been sitting here. That prevents over extraction of certain regions in the coffee bed and allows us to hopefully get better flavor. The other thing you're going to note is evaporation is definitely going to play a factor here with an accurate scale. We are losing water by the 1/10 of the gram as it is evaporating off the top. Okay, so we're almost done. I want to make sure all the water, if I'm weighing the entire brew device, I want to make sure all of that has drained through before I remove it. So we're about 12 seconds over for that final drain. Cool. So the next thing that we can do is we can taste it, but this is really hot to taste right now, and it's really going to need to cool. And the other thing I like to do is I like to sort of pour it back and forth between a thermos to get a little bit of oxygen, and it changes the mouthfeel. And I think it makes for a better cup of coffee. Yeah, it's good. So I like to serve in little 4-ounce cups. I just find it nice to have a hot thermos that has all my coffee, and I can pour and fill this up and have a nice hot cup of coffee that you can just hold in your hands, warm you up on a cold morning day, or just like give you that comfort feeling. So next what I do is I'll take this thermos and I'll pour back and forth. So I'll pour coffee into the thermos. And I'll do this a few times, and then I'll pour it back the other way. And this allows you to get air incorporated back in, which is going to change the texture of the coffee. Now be careful you don't pour this on your fingers. If it's early in the morning and you're not coordinated, you might want to practice with cold water. But I do this a few times because the boiling process has removed the oxygen, the air that is in the fluid of the water. And so by doing this a couple times, we now get a much better cup of coffee. So I typically will use this if I'm doing a large batch. So this is just a thermos. And then I've got these for single cup Harios, but I've already done 2, so I've filled up 2 of my thermoses already. All right, so let's give that a taste. That's had a chance to cool down a little bit. And I'll pour a little bit in here. I don't want a lot because I want this to be able to cool down a little bit and then taste it. The nice thing about the app is that this continues to count up. So I made a mental note when we finished that we were about 12 seconds over. And that's something that I can log in my notebook, or I can log in the future, I'll be able to log that in the app. But this counting up lets me know like how long it's been since we've sort of finished. And that can give me an indication of the taste as it changes over time. That's really good. I've done 2 brews this morning. The first brew, it was 40 seconds over my end time for it to finish draining. I was still, I guess, half asleep when I did that. The second one, I guess I got a little bit too aggressive on the pour, and I actually finished 10 seconds before the end time. I let it drip until the end time, but it tasted good. It was just a little sour. So that to me is an indication that it was a little bit under extracted. All right, and so that is my technique. I'm gonna put this away and enjoy it later. Thanks for watching.